I'm Al Hunt.
And I'm Mark Halperin. With all due respect to Herman Cain, this time it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. On the show tonight, George Pataki's the one, and is Rand Paul getting zeroed out? But first, 1-0, as in 10. Latest Quinnipiac poll of registered Republican voters shows five White House prospects are tied at the top, each with 10%. They are, not surprisingly maybe, Jeb Bush, Ben Carson, Mike Huckabee, Marco Rubio, and Scott Walker. Al, do any members of this Fab Five have the potential to break out of this top 10?
Mark, I'm tempted to say Marco Rubio, but 6 months ago I declared he was dead. So I'm not quite sure I want to make any prediction now. This is the most wide-open, unpredictable race we've ever seen. Even great seers like Charlie Cook and Mark Halperin and J. Arthur Heilemann tread very lightly on any predictions. A mistake, an intervening event, how the matchup shake out, all are going to determine who might break out, and it may take a while.
Yeah. I mean, look, we all have the same reaction to this poll. There's a gee whiz quality to a five-way tie for first. But It's not just a tie. They're at 10. The front runners are at 10. That's a level of support, which, as you suggested, one bad day for any of those guys at 10 could put them down to 5. And a good day from some of the other people hanging back, Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, could put them in the lead.
Yeah, it could. And, Mark, you know, this is not the kind of a poll that discourages George Pataki or anybody else from getting in this race. When you see no one that they all just barely break double figures, you're not going to say, man, I don't want to get in this race because I can't win. If I start at 1, I only got to get 10 more.
Yeah, and look, most of the candidates are spending the bulk of their time raising money, mostly for television ads and other paid media to communicate with voters. I don't know that paid media is going to drive very many poll numbers higher nationally or in these key states. This is, I think, a race that's not going to have, as I said before, a front runner until after Iowa at the earliest.
I totally agree. The debates may start to shape it a bit, may knock a few people out, a few people up, but it's going to be Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yep. All right, as Al said, referring to George Pataki, not discouraged from getting in, even though he's only registering at not even 1%. Basically, no respondents supported George Pataki in that QPAC poll. But he did announce his candidacy today in Exeter, New Hampshire. He's in the race for real after flirting with running in the past. Here's how Governor Pataki framed his candidacy this morning, putting an emphasis on his record as the governor of New York.
After 12 years of my conservative policies, we replaced dependency with opportunity, resignation with hope, mere existence with dreams, a welfare check with a paycheck. It is to preserve and protect that freedom that this morning I announce I am a candidate for the Republican nomination for President of the United States.
Pretty fired up, George Pataki, Al. He's obviously at best a long shot for the nomination, but can his presence influence the outcome or the contours of the race?
Mark, it could, but I don't think he's going to take that route. The way to do it is to run as a genuine moderate against the rightward rush of the party. Pete King has talked about that. But it doesn't appear that George Pataki is going to do that. And what's his place? Most New Yorkers can't even remember the guys between the two Cuomos as governor. If he compares to others, Jeb Bush got higher marks as governor. Rick Perry served longer. Scott Walker's more current. I just don't see where George Pataki fits in.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. He's not emphasizing the one thing that would make him different by any means. I do think he can influence the race in three ways. One is he is a very smart guy. His intelligence is underrated. If he can find his way, if not into the literal debates, into the conversation, I think he could do some damage to some other Republicans. Two, he's going to focus on New Hampshire. Only Chris Christie has got as New Hampshire a centric path or strategy, and I think he spent more time up there than anybody else. He could be a factor there. And the last thing is this message, which we're going to listen to a little bit of later. Smaller government. Lots of other people are running on it, but he's running on it with an anti-Washington sensibility that I think will help at least push the argument along.
I want to cover the George Pataki-Bobby Jindal debate, the battle of the one percenters. I mean, that's what it's all about.
1% or less. I mean, it's a problem in the field discredited. You not only got to grow your support if you're George Pataki, you got to pass over 16 other guys and one gal in order to get to the top. It is daunting. He doesn't need a luck of one or two people dropping out. He needs a lot more luck than that.
Yeah,
All
it
right,
could be
in this
-2.
crowded, yep. In this crowded Republican field, everybody's looking for a way to separate themselves out somehow from the rest. Rand Paul is doing that by turning the NSA into public enemy number one. Now, all this week, some of Rand Paul's fellow Republicans are looking for their own look-at-me chances, and they've done that by turning against him. Chris Christie and Bobby Jindal have been ultra-aggressive this week in criticizing Paul's comments on ISIS that he made to Morning Joe. Moments ago on Fox News, Scott Walker joined in, taking issue with what Paul said about ISIS.
I just think he's wrong on that. I think, unfortunately, I respect Senator Paul on a lot of other issues. I'm a big fan of him on limiting the size and scope of the federal government.
And you could support him as a nominee if he were
Well, I think there's a lot of good things about it, but I think he's just wrong on this one. And it's one of those where Republican or Democrat alike, if somebody's saying something wrong, I'm not going to criticize him personally, but I do think there's a tendency out there for certain candidates to go after people on personality basis. I think we should talk about the facts, and the facts are clear.
So Walker joined in but was relatively low-key. But for people like Christie and for Jindal, who are not at the top of the pack, criticizing Paul is part of looking what's called in political circles, looking for a moment of strength. Now, pretty much the same thing happened in the last two Republican nomination battles. If you don't remember, this is how the Republicans running for president then sought their own moments of strength by slamming not Rand Paul, but his father, Ron Paul. Enjoy this brief montage.
Congressman Paul, that is irresponsible.
Nothing could be more dangerous than the comments that we just heard.
Someone who's running for the President of the United States in the Republican Party should not be parroting what Osama bin Laden said on 9/11.
I want to tell you that that kind of isolationism, sir, is what caused World War II. We allowed
So based on what happened in the debates 4 years ago and 8 years ago, and based on the fact that Chris Christie today, in an interview with Hugh Hewitt, took another shot at Rand Paul, there's more of this to come for sure. Al, who will win this fight over national security with Rand Paul on one side and everybody else pretty much on the other side?
Mark, I think Rand Paul, actually, at least in the short run. Look, the country is more hawkish than when his daddy ran, but he is a tougher and a more combative candidate than Ron Paul. He's going to give back, too. And I think on some of these issues, particularly like the NSA and eavesdropping, it plays to his libertarian base. And, if it's 7 guys against 1, all he's got to do is get 15%, and he's ahead of them.
The other thing, I totally agree, Al, and the other issue in the short term, I agree. The other issue is expanding the party. Almost all these other candidates are fishing in the pond where Republican voters have always lived. Rand Paul's chances of being the nominee depend on doing what Barack Obama did, bringing new voters in. And a lot of new voters find his positions appealing, certainly on the NSA, and maybe even based on what he said on Morning Joe about ISIS.
And particularly younger voters. You're absolutely right. I think they'll be with him on both those issues.
I think, though, in the debates, it's going to be irresistible. We saw Scott Walker soft-pedaled a little bit there. We've not heard from Rubio and Bush on the Rand Paul thing. I think in the debates, they'll be tempted to go after, too, because national security is the top issue for Republican voters. All right, so going back to that Quinnipiac poll we talked about earlier in the show, we want to go to a question about Hillary Clinton that was asked. Is she trustworthy? General election voters said no, 53% no, 39% yes. But Hillary Clinton remains in that poll rock solid in his support for the Democratic nomination, and she leads all the Republican would-be challengers in a general election mythical matchup, close with Rubio, close with Paul, but over everybody and big over the rest. So, Al, looking at the Quinnipiac poll as it pertains to Hillary Clinton, should Brooklyn be worried about that poll and the numbers in it?
I don't think they should be worried about those numbers per se, Mark. If trustworthiness were the key factor, Richard Nixon never would have won in '68 or Bill Clinton in '92. Her leadership trumps that. But I think there's some things that do worry them, though, separate from that. The drip, drip, drip of the Clinton Foundation. Today it was the corrupt soccer foundation contributed to the Clinton Foundation. Maybe they contribute to a lot of things, but it's a story that won't go away. The second thing that worries them, and don't laugh at me, Mark, Bernie Sanders. He more and more looks like the perfect protest candidate, authentic to the core.
Yeah, there's another story today in Politico about Sidney Blumenthal being paid by the Clinton Foundation. The drip continues, but it is a Clinton family tradition. Deal with scandal and controversy, have people maybe don't think you always tell the truth, but still be seen as a strong leader. And right now, the Clinton camp is keeping their head down. We've been asking them for days for questions about the revelations regarding Bill Clinton's LLC. They're just not answering. Their view is head down, talk about issues, and hope for the best. And I think that poll suggests them they're doing all right on that score. All right, more about Hillary Clinton coming up after the break. Specifically, what did George Pataki say about her today? We'll be right back. So on this George Pataki announcement day, we thought we'd go with that old, with all due respect, standby move, pull out some of the best blocks of his kickoff speech, see how he did. We're going to start with Governor Pataki and what he said about the woman he'd like to run against for the big job, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
We are the party of the middle class. Unless by middle class they mean someone who left the White House dead broke and 10 years later had $100 million. Unless by middle class they mean someone who charges a poor country $500,000 for a half-hour speech. That's their party's candidate. She speaks for the middle class?
So, Al, every Republican who runs is going to take their best shot at Hillary Clinton. How would you rate how Pataki talked about her in terms of the issues he chose, the tone, and the delivery?
Oh, I thought the delivery was good. I thought they were good shots. He's not going to be the anti-Hillary candidate, though, Mark. He spent 6 years as governor working with her when she was senator, and that's what governors and senators do. But that rather ill positions him for that role. Carly Fiorina actually, I think, has even better sound bites than George Pataki. So that's not going to be his road to victory.
Yeah. I mean, look, he's a pretty rich guy himself, probably not as rich as the Clintons, but it's going to be interesting to see what the Clinton opposition research team does to people who come after her for being out of touch, for being so wealthy. I'm going to be interested to see. They've already started going back a little bit, her allies, on Jeb Bush and his wealth and how he made it. But I'll be interested to see if anybody starts to do damage. Fiorina, for instance, is quite rich. I've not seen, at least above the surface, any Clinton allies going after her. But I suspect that's coming if people start to hone that line of attack.
Mark, if they hit 4 or 5% in the polls, it'll come.
Yeah. All right. Another thing Governor Pataki talked about quite a bit today was 9/11. Of course, he was governor of New York when that tragedy occurred. And he talked today at some length about how that experience shaped his views, including on foreign policy.
I saw up close the horrible consequences of too many believing that because radical Islam was thousands of miles away across an ocean, that we were safe in America. But I will never forget the lesson of September 11th. We will destroy radical Islam's ability to attack us over there before they have the chance to attack us here.
So, Al, obviously 9/11 is still a pretty big touchstone for the country, for the Republican Party. How do you rate Pataki's message on that?
Mark, I want to say something nice about George Pataki. You know, he's a good guy. But this one doesn't cut either. Rudy Giuliani was the person most identified with 9/11. And if it didn't cut for him, and it didn't at all, why is it going to cut for George Pataki?
Yeah, I mean, look, it is certainly a big part of his pitch, but as you suggested, he is not nationally associated with that. It's going to be hard for people to convince him. And the filter, particularly New York-based reporters, recall 9/11, think about 9/11 and Pataki's leadership almost always in contrast to how Rudy Giuliani was perceived on those days, as opposed to Pataki.
Yeah, and I do think, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Rand Paul, I think with ISIS and other things, the country is a little bit more hawkish than it was when Rudy ran. But I don't think George Pataki is going to say, I'm the man with a bullhorn who stood up against, against that terrible threat back on that awful day. I don't think his record's bad on that. I just don't think it's going to be the sort of thing that'll rally people around him.
Yeah. Overall, though, I think you agree, and based on watching his performance today, he is getting better. He is getting more experience as a presidential candidate, just in terms of delivery. And I still believe he'll have New Hampshire, not to himself, but he'll spend a lot of time up there. He has a good cultural fit for the state, and he showed that today. He's going to have the ability to talk to an audience that will listen to him, even if it doesn't move his poll numbers very much.
But don't underestimate, you're going to laugh again at me, Mark, Lindsey Graham up there, too. New Hampshire is a perfect Lindsey Graham state, who's one person who will be a real hawk, which may appeal to certain voters up there.
Right. All right, one more soundbite we want to play real quick here, which is Governor Pataki's core message, smaller government.
Government has grown too big, too powerful, too expensive, too intrusive. They told me that when I ran for governor of New York. They said I couldn't win. Too many people were dependent on government. The bureaucrats and powerful interests were too strong. The people couldn't regain their confidence in New York's future. In a sense, they were right. They couldn't do it. But I knew I could, and we did.
Again, as you suggested, other governors in this rate have cut spending. It's going to be hard for him to break through there, but I do think he's going to influence the debate on this issue.
Yeah, he's sincere on this. There is no pro-regulation core in the Republican Party base, so it's an issue that will resonate with voters. And I think he did it pretty well today.
Yeah. His problem is if he starts to get some traction on this issue, people will scrutinize his record in New York. He did have a Democratic legislature to deal with, and he didn't control spending as much as he would have liked, but he is going to have to deal with the record of what New York spent during the time he was in office.
Yeah, and it's going to be compared to who? Compared to Bush, compared to Walker, compared to the others, and that may make it hard for him to break out.
Yeah, he's one of the people vying to get into the debates with this standard of only the top 10 getting into at least the first couple debates. I think if he finds his way in, unlikely at this point, but if he finds his way in, he will be a formidable debater, more formidable than some people think.
Yeah, but watch Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz.
Okay. One more note on Governor Pataki. Before his announcement today in New Hampshire, he released a video online. It's a pretty long video, really well produced. There was in it, however, one thing that we found a little strange. Images of curtains fluttering, the silhouette. Seriously, it seemed like George Pataki was pitching himself as much as a fragrance salesman as he was as commander-in-chief. You can see our take on that important question right now on BloombergPolitics.com. Coming up, you ever been inside a media scrum? No? Well, buckle up. We take you deep inside the scrum zone after this. Talk a lot here about how the media interacts with presidential prospects at press conferences and sit-down interviews, and most commonly in what is called the media scrum. It's always been a big part of political events, but now the scrums are even crazier because anybody can bring a camera with them, and they do. We wanted to have some fun with all this, so we sent our colleagues Matt Negrin and Griffin Hammond to the recent South Carolina Freedom Summit to break down the science of the scrum, take out their own cameras and microphones, and bring all of you into the scrum zone.
This is the South Carolina Freedom Summit, and you're in the scrum zone!
I'm going to try to get as close as I can and get my microphone as close to what he says. I'm more of a listener than a talker, so I usually don't ask that many questions.
Let's see how close David can get to Governor Scott Walker in the first scrum of the day.
Really smart move right here. He's camped outside the stage right exit before the scrum gets out of control.
David Jackson, USA Today. How's it going?
Looks like David is just introducing himself to Walker. Good strategy, playing the long game. That'll pay off later.
Watch how David slows Walker down to maximize his time in the Corps. That's a strategy we've seen with veteran scrummers like Johnny Apple, Jules Whitcover, all the greats.
How was the scrum zone with Scott Walker?
Oh, it was crowded, as you might expect. He's considered one of the top candidates. The Corps is a lot bigger now because everybody has a camera, it seems, these days, not just the television people. I just did what I wanted to do. Just wanted to say hello and remind him who I was. That was my strategy today.
Good thing David got in there early, because just moments later, the size of Walker's scrum exploded.
Wow, this is now a multi-layer scrum. It's going to take a real athlete to force their way in there.
I'm going to try to join the scrum and ask him some questions if we can. I want to ask him about immigration. He didn't mention it in the speech. It's obviously a big issue that he's kind of caught between Republican donors and Republican base voters on this one, so we'll see what happens. I have no secret weapon. I'm just going to try to be aggressive.
Ooh, looks like he's trapped outside in the crust.
Yeah, tough to break in to get close to Walker. Even David Jackson is on the outer layer.
Here he goes. You can see Sahil squeeze into that magma layer. That is good maneuvering. Scrum goes the dynamite.
It's looking to be a very physical day in South Carolina, and Sahil proves that he's got what it takes.
Today, Scott Walker commanded the largest scrum, followed closely by Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. But as always, in the zero scrum game, we take a look at the three smallest scrums of the day. John Bolton, Bobby Jindal,
Where's the media scrum?
and George Pataki.
Oh, it's almost too awkward to watch. We caught up with Governor Pataki afterward to get his reaction. Notice no one was sitting down.
That's fine. It's been a long conference, a lot of speakers. It's fine. I'm used to it.
We see a lot of guys here get huge scrums, huge followings. Yeah. Nothing for you. How do you feel?
It's what I expect. You know, you start at the bottom, you work your way up, and ultimately you win.
The media had a lot of questions for Marco Rubio, earning him the second largest scrum of the day.
My strategy is not dissimilar to what it is in the hallways of the Senate, which is to elbow past people and hope I can get in front of him.
It looks like we've got a rare double scrum. We've got Marco Rubio over there and Donald Trump right here. What do you do in this situation?
With all due respect to Mr. Trump, I'm more interested at the moment in Senator Rubio.
All right, Sabrina's in a good position. She's got her recorder out. She turns it on. But Rubio is on the move, and she is stuck in the crust.
Suddenly, the scrum loosens up, and watch Sabrina's stellar hustle chasing him down the hallway. Sadly, to no avail. Wow, so no one here got anything out of Rubio.
Actually, Griffin, roll that tape back, because you didn't see these two staking out the Rubio scrum from the very beginning. And what is your goal getting to the center, getting to Marco Rubio? What do you want out of this?
Love to take a picture with him.
How much time do you think you'll get?
30 seconds maybe.
Well, it looks like it's going to happen right now because he's done. Let's do it.
Okay, yay.
Watch this. Rubio, he's in a hurry to exit, but listen to their tenacity.
Okay, wait.
Whoa, right there. Take that home, frame it. That is going to be a beautiful souvenir.
We're short, so we were just like getting in there, forcing our way in there. Yeah, I could tell in his eyes, he really wanted to.
Those two identical young voters prove that you don't even need press credentials to get the most access to the candidate. We can all learn from that kind of persistence. You guys are huge Scrum Zone winners today.
Yeah, thank you. We nailed it. We nailed it.
Matt and Griffin, stay safe out there in the very dangerous Scrum Zone. And we're going to be right back with some breaking news about a former Speaker of the House who has been indicted right after this. Some late-breaking indictment news on the wire, this time not about FIFA. The Justice Department has in charge Dennis Hastert, the former House Speaker from Illinois, with a couple of things. He moved around almost $1 million to avoid it being reported by the banks, and he's charged with lying. Lots of penalties if he's convicted. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Sayonara.